In July of 1947, something crashed on a ranch in New Mexico. What it actually was depends entirely on who you ask and when you ask them. Let's start with the facts nobody disputes. On June 14th, a rancher named Mac Brazel found strange debris scattered across his property near Roswell. Sticks, tinfoil, rubber, and tape, all tangled together. He didn't think much of it at first. He'd seen weather balloons before. But this debris was different. Lightweight, yet strangely tough. Some pieces couldn't be cut, burned, or dented, no matter what he tried. Weeks passed. Then, on July 8th, Brazel brought the material to the local sheriff, who alerted the Roswell Army airfield. The military moved fast. Major Jesse Marcel was sent to collect the debris, and that same day, the base issued a press release. It said in plain language that they had recovered a crashed flying disc.
Yes, the United States military told the newspapers they'd caught a flying saucer. The story ran in the Roswell Daily Record under the headline, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." For about 24 hours, the American public believed the government had proof of alien life sitting in a hangar. Then, just as fast, the story changed. The very next day, the military reversed course entirely. General Roger Ramey held a press conference and said the whole thing had been a mistake. What Brazel found wasn't a flying disc, it was a weather balloon. Ramey posed for photos with the wreckage, smiling, holding up bits of foil and sticks that, frankly, did look a lot like a weather balloon. Case closed. Or so it seemed, for about 30 years. The truth is, weather balloon wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. In 1994, after decades of conspiracy theories and public pressure, the Air Force finally admitted what the debris actually was. It wasn't a standard weather balloon. It was part of a classified program called Project Mogul. Project Mogul used high-altitude balloons rigged with sensitive microphones to detect sound waves from Soviet nuclear tests. This was 1947. The Cold War was just beginning, and the United States desperately needed a way to monitor Soviet nuclear activity without setting foot in Soviet territory. Mogul balloons flew in long trains, sometimes over 600 feet, carrying strange rubber, foil, and tape that could easily be mistaken for something otherworldly if you didn't know what you were looking at. That explains the tinfoil. It explains the sticks and tape. It even explains why the material was so unusual for its time, since it used technology that was, at that point, top secret. What it doesn't fully explain is why the initial announcement said flying disc in the first place. So here's where it gets messier. Historians generally agree the flying disc language was likely a mix of genuine confusion and overeager wording from a junior officer, not evidence of an actual alien encounter. Flying saucers were a brand new cultural sensation in the summer of 1947. Just weeks earlier, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 strange objects flying near Mount Rainier, and the press coined the term flying saucer to describe them. The country was primed to see saucers everywhere. When Brazel's debris turned up, that framing was fresh in everyone's mind. Once the military corrected itself with the weather balloon story, most people moved on. Roswell became a local curiosity, not a national obsession. For about 3 decades, it barely came up at all.
Then, in 1978, a nuclear physicist named Stanton Friedman interviewed Jesse Marcel, the same officer who'd originally collected the debris in 1947. Marcel now claimed the material he'd handled wasn't a balloon at all. He described metal that couldn't be dented with a sledgehammer and symbols on the debris that resembled hieroglyphics. This interview reignited public interest, and through the 1980s and 90s, the story grew. Books were published. Alleged witnesses came forward. Some claimed alien bodies had been recovered alongside the wreckage and taken to a secret facility. This is where Area 51 entered the Roswell mythology,
even though Area 51 wasn't established until years after the crash and has no verified connection to the incident at all. By the 1990s, Roswell wasn't really about a balloon crash anymore. It had become a symbol, a shorthand for government secrecy and cover-ups in general, fueled by real Cold War paranoia about what the military wasn't telling its own citizens. And that paranoia wasn't entirely unfounded. The government genuinely was hiding something in 1947, just not aliens. Project Mogul was classified specifically because the United States didn't want the Soviet Union to know it was being monitored. Admitting the truth about a nuclear surveillance program would have exposed a critical intelligence operation. A vague reference to a weather balloon was simpler and safer than explaining any of that in 1947. So when people say the government covered up Roswell, they're technically right. There was a cover-up. It just wasn't a cover-up of aliens. It was a cover-up of Cold War espionage technology, which, compared to a spaceship, sounds a little less exciting, but is arguably more revealing about how governments actually operate. What's fascinating about Roswell isn't really the crash itself. It's what happened afterward. A brief, honest mistake in a press release, followed by a vague, half-true correction, created a 30-year vacuum where speculation was free to grow. Human memory and storytelling filled in that vacuum, adding sledgehammer-proof metal and alien bodies decades after the fact, shaped by a culture that had, by then, spent years absorbing science fiction and Cold War distrust.
The lesson of Roswell might not be about extraterrestrials at all. It might be about what happens when official explanations are incomplete. People don't stop asking questions just because the government tells them to. They just start answering those questions themselves. And in a town in New Mexico, with a crashed spy balloon and a suspiciously confident press release, that's exactly what they did.